Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this March 15th, 2018 day on our calendar. Greg Anthony here. This is First Amendment Radio. Today I want to travel back to 2006 and 2008 and read a couple letters to you. One letter was addressed to me, and another was addressed to every citizen in America. And this goes to show you, we're going to go back over a decade, how really nothing has changed, and how things have really gotten worse. And people ask me all the time, how come people don't understand what you talk about on this show? And I said, it's not for lack of me talking about it. It's for the controlled media in both the mainstream, or the lamestream media as they're called, as well as the alternative media. Now, I received this letter in 2008 from a group called Love of Life, and they were kind enough to put all my articles up there, free of charge, by the way. And here's what they said. Hello, Greg. It is amazing how little our fellow Americans now know about the Jesuits. I have started asking these two questions. I started asking myself, how old was I when the word Jesuit came into my vocabulary? Well, I started thinking about that, and the Jesuits came into my vocabulary probably in high school, because I went to a place called Notre Dame, and it was run by the Holy Cross Fathers, who also run the University of Notre Dame. And the first word about Jesuits I heard was from a school near us called Loyola High School, and it was run by Jesuit priests. And all I used to hear was, boy, how strict they were and how smart they were. And there was kind of a running joke going on that we could handle the Loyola boys, but they would beat us in a debate any day. Okay. They were the brains, we were the brawn. Okay, so that's when I first heard about a Jesuit priest. And the reader goes on to tell me in her letter, or his letter, who are the Jesuits and how much do you know about them? And I've asked that question many times to many people, and I've done many types of things where I used to go out and do radio shows out in public in local bars and local establishments. We used to travel from Boulder to Idaho, South Dakota, doing on-the-road shows. And questions we would always ask were, do you know who the Jesuits are? And I would say that probably 9 out of 10 people didn't. And I came away with this idea. These guys are pretty slick, because what they really do should be known to everybody in America. And if they can get away with it without you even knowing who they are, how are you ever going to combat them? Well, the letter goes on to say that after asking these two questions to a few friends, I realized how little is known about them in times we live. I agree with her totally. How can we expose the Jesuits of history, she says? I think first we have to share the word Jesuit with just a couple questions. Also, if the book Foreign Conspiracy was read by Americans, it would stop their momentum overnight. And what she's talking about is a book written by Samuel Morse back in 1835. And Samuel Morse was the inventor of the Morse code. You know, the way that we used to communicate like this. Well, that's how we communicated before the internet. At least they did it during World War I, World War II. And Samuel Morse was the inventor of the Morse code and a well-respected scientist. Well, he realized back during the 1800s what was happening to America and Rome's obsession with overthrowing our country. And back then they didn't have the internet. They couldn't do things quickly. So he had to take a ship and travel to Rome. And he spent a number of months there researching the book he wrote called Foreign Conspiracy, and the title's a little longer. And what it really talked about was Rome's penchant, Rome's obsession, Rome's thorough hatred of democracy, how they speak out of both sides of their mouth, how the populace of most countries hear one thing and they do another. And the real goal was to overthrow America. And he wrote this book back in 1835. And the nice thing about it was back then even newspapers published excerpts of it. And many people understood who the Jesuits, more of them understood who they were back then than now. Now, if you even go back farther to when our first settlers came here, they knew everything about them because they were coming here to get away from their tyranny in England, many of them, and in other parts of Europe. And in fact, no Jesuit was allowed on any ship coming to America, and if they were, they would be either sent back, or if they put up a fight, you know what would happen. And they were so concerned that if you didn't carry a Bible, and this was written by one of the ship captains that came here in the early 1600s, he said they used to check everybody, and if they didn't have a Bible, they were considered a person of interest. And so more people knew about them back then. So we move forward to the 1800s, and even less people knew about it from the 1600s. Then we move forward to now, and not anybody knows about it. So what is their goal? Did you ever hear the word secret society that President Kennedy talked about in his secret society speech he gave regarding, although he didn't mention them by name, it was basically the papacy, and he said no country of ours will be ruled by a pope. And also when he did not allow Cardinal Spellman into the White House, that was a pretty obvious clue to the globalists back then that Kennedy was backstabbing them, and he had to be put away, and he was, with the help of people like George Bush and also Lyndon Johnson, who became president. And did you know that on the desk of the president, right before, and he was going to sign this when he came back from Dallas, he was going to end the Vietnam War in 1962, in the early 60s, before he was killed. The first thing that Lyndon Johnson did when he became president was to not to sign that order to end the Vietnam War. And how long did it linger on, and how many more people were killed? Not only Americans, but Buddhist Wahas. Hundreds of thousands of innocent children and women and Buddhists were killed, along with many, many Americans and other people. So it was a bloodbath, and Kennedy wanted it over, and that's another reason he was killed, because there was a lot of money to be made, and this threat of communism back then had to play its course, which then led to now the War on Terror. So anyway, Samuel Morse knew about that, knew a lot about that, and so did a lot of other people. But as the years go on, Kennedy's secret society speech really is important, because he told us exactly what's going on. And the reason that people, I say this, even from the time that I started learned about the Jesuits in the 80s, and then openly started talking about them here after 9/11, I think less people understand it today. Most people say, well, more people do. I think on per capita, less people do. And the reason is that you're going to get a clique group. It's kind of like if we want to use a slang term, a cult following here, them being the occult. And that's what you get here. You get a small group of people follow my show or follow people that talk about this. And it remains a tiny microcosm in a huge world where this message is being muted And I always say this, coming from the mainstream, coming from, if you know a little bit about me, I was the editor of my college paper. I worked for newspapers. And once I realized the true story behind the Jesuits in Rome, I knew that this was not a story that you can just let go if you really want to find the truth. And so, what did George Orwell say? He said, and I'll paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, in a world of, mistrust and globalization, the truth is very, very hard to come by, And that's a paraphrase. And all he was saying was that the more globalization comes, the more that technology takes over, the less truth is accepted in a society. And that's exactly what's going on here. Because if you know as well as I do, if you start talking about this story, you will be labeled as either a radical, a goofy person, a terrorist, whatever, when you're getting at the truth. And so what does that tell you? Most people are living under a fantasy that they willingly accept because the powers that be have total control over them. There's no other way. They dole out a little bit here, a little bit there, and people go on their merry way going, how could I ever change even if I did know the truth? But isn't it funny that, even in a country like this, how many of you out there really worship anything on Sundays or Saturdays or have a faith, no matter what it is? And ask yourself how many people around the world do that too in different ways. And the basic tenet of any kind of faith is seeking the truth, right? Seeking that you are born to know. You're born here for a reason. And so people start searching out, what is my reason for living? Well, you can't understand that unless you seek out the truth about things that are around you. And the most important things are, what country are you from? What faith do you believe in? And do you really understand what that's all about? And who is controlling these thoughts of yours? So what I'm getting at, it's no different than if you live in another part of the world. They may subscribe to a different spirituality. They may have a different government. But do you really understand what that's all about? And I think, really, people always ask me, what are the two most important things for a person to do in their life? And I said, outside of eating and sleeping and doing the things that you have to do, it's to understand the government you live under, because that's what you wake up to every day. And also, you understand the religion or the faith that you were born into or that you subscribe to now. And to do that, you have to understand the hierarchy. And to do that, you can't do it without understanding the Jesuits. And the reason I say that is because over the course of history, these people, this organization, the Vatican, the largest and the richest organization in the world, this is the military arm of this group, similar to what the Knights Templars were all about. And they are the ones that control a lot of your education, a lot of your foreign policy or your domestic policy in whatever country you live in. And they also control when the wars begin and when they end. And so if you don't get to the bottom of it, the idea of understanding the truth gets very difficult, because it's pretty easy to get led down the wrong path. And I can attest to that too, because for many years in my life, I did. And I really look, and I start looking at some young people in this little occult group that we have, and I call it that because that's what we're studying, really, the occult, the Vatican, their spirituality, which is Satan, and satanic worship, which filters down into your government and into the governments of the world through many different faiths and religions. And so the point is, when I start seeing some of the people that really understand this, I really marvel at some kids who do it when they're 25, 20, 30. It took me a lot longer. And I lived under this idea of the way the world is, picking a side, being a Democrat, being a Republican, being a Catholic, being an atheist, not really understanding who the hell I was or what I was living under. And so this letter spurred me into thinking about this. And she said to look at what Samuel Morris wrote, which I have, and I hope you have. And another story comes to mind. When I was doing stories years ago, one of Samuel Morris's relatives contacted me, and her husband ran a small Christian church in a southern, I think it was somewhere in North Carolina or South Carolina. And she wrote me many times talking about how they were being infiltrated or persecuted or targeted by the IRS, targeted by the BATF, all these different organizations, trying to put them out of business for preaching Christianity, her faith. And she understood Samuel Morris. It was it was a relative. And I knew, and I told her, you know they targeted you because they know who you are. And if you don't think they do, just ask the Mormon faith. You know what they do? You know what the Mormons' real goal is for the New World Order? They're the genealogists. They have records of all of these families that go way back. If you want to know about your family, you want to know about everything, the Mormons have it all in their little tabernacles wherever they are, in their little, what do they do down in the catacombs of the Mormon faith? Talk to a guy by the name of A. True Ott, who was on my show many times. He'll tell you, similar to what the Vatican does down there. But anyway, they knew who she was, and they targeted her. So, let's go on with the letter that she wrote. It isn't that long. And she said also, Alex Jones' endgame should be uncovered. Well, good for you. I've always said that to people. Alex Jones could be exposed by replaying Bill Cooper's expose of Alex's show on the eve of December 1999. I have watched the whole video Endgame. Nothing is said about the Knights of Malta or the Jesuits. In short, understanding what is going on has given me a peace of mind. It has made me push back and really listen. Thank you. Now, what she says about Alex Jones is so true. Now, I like to mix what I read with personal knowledge, personal experiences. And for a couple years, I worked very closely. Well, my radio show was right after his or before his. And I was in Austin, Texas a while. And although I didn't spend much time with Alex, I felt the brunt of his ideas back around 2005 or 6, when you would speak about the Vatican like I did. There was no longer any communication with him. For example, prior to me doing that on almost a daily basis, or at least 3 to 4 times a week on my show, until I was told by the radio executives, you cannot talk about them every day. And I said, why? Well, Alex, back then, claimed I was insane, I was crazy, and basically this is after being on his show many, many times, him asking me to come on stories I wrote about 9/11, things like that, then getting a radio show on the same Genesis network. But as soon as I touched the Vatican, it touched a nerve, and I think it did by, not him, but his handler saying, no, you got to stop him somehow. And he did. He used his bigger voice, which he gets paid millions of dollars now to do what he does. And the idea back then was, his stance on the Vatican was that, they were just a bunch of old priests, they have no money. Over the years now, he has changed, and he is saying this to even several people I used to interview, that Pope Francis is evil, and there's a bad side to the Vatican. So what he's done is playing the Vatican game now, playing the chaos game. You're going to say that there's a part of the Vatican that's good, there's a part bad, and the good side is fighting the bad side. Well, Alex, there is no good side. And you seemingly said that years ago when you said they were all good. They were all just old priests that hadn't money at all. When in fact the Vatican is the richest organization by bar none in the world. And that is why people ask me, well, why would a politician want to cuddle up with the Vatican and the Jesuits? Well, one, they always go to where the money is. And I don't care if you're a guy like Trump, I don't care if you're Putin, I don't care if you're the richest Chinese leader in the world, you got a penny to $1 million of what they have. Because they not only have more money and power worldwide. They have knowledge going back hundreds of years that any one of these leaders doesn't have. And so they use that, and they work with them. So when you ask who's the kingpin, who's the top, it's a very simple question people have asked me. Well, it's the Rockefellers. It's the Rothschilds. Well, I ask you this. The Rothschilds have their money where? The Vatican Bank, and the Vatican, outside of the Vatican Bank, puts a lot of money into the hands of the Rothschilds. Who has the power? The banker? Or the person who has the money giving it to the banker? Of course, it's the Vatican who has the money giving it to Rothschild. And Rothschild is nothing more than what I call a papal court Jew, a papal court Jew. A Jew masquerading as a Jew working for the Vatican. And there's a lot of those in Israel. You can ask Barry Chamish, who spent his life talking about it. Barry passed away recently. And he had a radio show right here on this radio station and came on my show many times. And Barry understood the Knesset in Israel is bought and paid for by the Vatican, just like the Congress here in America is. And just like the Politburo in Russia, and just like the Chinese. If you want to understand about the Chinese, go back in history when the Jesuits were the head astronomers in the Chinese court, in the highest of Chinese leaders' mansions. The Jesuits had already infiltrated China many, many years ago. So you have to look farther than just the leaders of your country. And all of you other ancillary countries like Peru, Spain, all these other countries that no one talks about now, Mexico, they're all the same. These countries have been bought and paid for just like the rest of them a lot earlier. Mexico's in the position it's in not because of the people, not because of the cartels, it's because of who they really work for. And just like one of the biggest mob bosses' grandsons told me once, he said, I'll tell you what, the three people that make money in the drug game are this. Of course, the mafia bosses, but not as much as the Vatican and the government. So you know what you're dealing with. And the cartels basically work with the mob, whether it be the Italian mob, the Chinese mob, whatever. And they're all getting a cut of the pie. And they got to do something with their money, right? What are they going to do with millions of dollars? They got to launder it somewhere, and guess where they go? Right to the Holy See, right to the Vatican Bank. That's one of the places. And the Vatican will take 10 to 15% of any kind of dirty money. And it comes out clean. You put it in the Vatican Bank, they throw some holy water on top of all that dirty money, and all of a sudden it's good money to buy arms, to buy influence, to buy assassins, whatever you want. And don't tell me they don't do it. You just got to look a little deeper. So anyway, that letter I wanted to read to you by a group that sent it to me way back. It is 10 years ago. And it's quite amazing, isn't it? And they did put something on they put P.S. What does the word Vatican really mean? I know we've discussed it, but let's see what they say. It should be Vaticanus. And here it is. It is very relevant to remember that the Vatican is from the classical Latin root word Vaticanus, which by definition means house of divination, dwelling of demons. Standing in the center of St. Peter's Square in an obelisk, symbol of a male sex organ in Satan worship, from Egypt, is an independent country with its own dogmatic constitution, with the Pope, Vicar of Christ, being the head of state. So there you go. I mean, it's right in their name. And we'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, we're back, and we're looking back at letters written to me and to other people, i.e. the whole American population. Right now, the first letter I read was addressed to me that we went over in the first half hour. This one I put up on my website in May 15, 2006, and the title was The New World Order's Letter to Every Citizen of the World, Warning Resistance is Futile. According to the letter addressed to everybody in America, it's useless to resist a one-world takeover, as the program is in its final stages. Well, when I read it, I said to myself, really? Bring it on. You know, we can resist in many different ways. It doesn't have to be a violent resistance. Everyone can resist it by themselves, by understanding it, by not succumbing to what they tell you every day, and to basically break the chain, at least within yourself, of their hold on you, so that you understand that what they've created in the world is a fantasy, and that you are one of the people fighting through that to get to the truth. So, you know, the idea of resistance, they're talking about a public resistance, a battle, a war, and that won't get you anywhere. And in fact, the New World Order, Vatican-led New World Order, wants you to become violent, wants to instigate. It's kind of like somebody that gets under your skin, that you know better not to say anything and to bite your tongue. And all of a sudden that person gets you so angry, you get into a fight, and then you get arrested, and the whole thing. That's exactly what they want. Because the more people that resist in a physical manner like this are going to fall prey to their system, and all they're going to do is turn it right around on you and say, listen, we are the people that are fighting for good. We are the ones who are in the right. We are the ones who love God and country, and you, Mr. American citizen, are the bad guy. That's what they want you to do, so you can resist in a different way. And I want to read this letter to you because it came out almost a decade ago. And you have to then wonder, well, who wrote it? It could be anybody. It could be coming from the highest levels of a propaganda campaign. It could be some big 400-pound guy sitting on a couch having nothing better to do and then writing it. So you don't know. But let's listen to what it says. It says, well, let me just say this. The New World Order is well known, like I said, among alternative news junkies. Really understand what's going on in a sense. If you got to get to this problem, though, you got to bring the spiritual and the political together. But to most Americans, the name tag put on the sinister and diabolical group of thugs trying to take over the world through globalism, spinning it off as a great thing, means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing because most people remain in the dark, have fallen victim to the powerful propaganda machine sweeping through the world like an out-of-control freight train. And it is. I mean, every year it seems to be moving quicker and quicker and quicker. For those who remain uninformed, the following is a letter to you, get up to speed, from an Illuminati propagandist, I said back then, about the coming one world order. Okay. Dearest citizen of the world. See, they've now classified you as a world citizen. It's not me. I guess he's writing to nobody, because I am not a citizen of the world. I am a citizen first. Well, I was born in Illinois, so I'm a citizen of the state of Illinois, the sovereign state of Illinois, and through no fault of my own, through just being born and getting a birth certificate in all capital letters, like a bill of lading, I was kind of like a piece of merchandise being brought into the the federal system. I became a citizen of the United States because I didn't have any say about it. I was born into it. And my parents didn't know anything about it. And I wasn't born into the federal government. I was born into the corporation of the United States, which is completely different. And we've done many shows on that as well. Now, dearest citizen of the world, I believe the time has come to reveal to you some of the perplexities you have faced in recent decades. It is well for you to understand some of these things so that you might know how to behave in the New World Order now taking shape on Earth. Now, what I find about this letter, when you piece it apart, first of all, they've already classified you as a world citizen. Second of all, they've now said you got to behave. So, it's not saying how to interact, how to become a free citizen. It's how to behave, how to listen to us. And whether it was that 400-pound nerd sitting there not knowing, writing this himself, or whether it was a propaganda campaign, we don't know, but that's the tone it takes, doesn't it? You behave, you're a world citizen, and you'll be okay. And it goes on to say, we want you to be able to become fully involved and integrated into our new society. After all, this is for your best interest if you will do that. Now, doesn't that sentence really tell you something? They don't tell you how you're going to be integrated. You're going to be integrated the way they want you to be. And you're not going to have any say about it. And they kind of threaten you in a way by saying, isn't it in your best interest if you do that? What tone does this letter take? Total control over you. So anybody that spins the New World Order or the globalism as a good thing, like many of the millions of millenniums growing up today in a fog, it won't be. First of all, it says, it is well that you understand some of our purposes so that you may fully cooperate. You have, see, now you're being told to cooperate. I cannot tell you the hard times you will face if you resist us. We have ways of dealing with resistors. I'm only telling you this now since it is much too late to turn things around. The days of putting a stop to us have long since passed. We have full control of the earth and its finances along with the major media propaganda, and there is simply no way any nation or power can defeat us. We have eyes in every level of government and every nation of the world. We know what is being planned, for our ears and eyes are ever present. State secrets are fully known to us. China, and this is written, remember back 2008, China recently accused the media in the U.S. of lying about Kosovo. Oh, you silly people, of course we lie. In this way, we can keep the people unbalanced and always facing controversy, which is very helpful to us. Have you not seen the talk show spectacle? Some of you believe we are liberals, and the good people are the conservatives. In reality, both serve our purposes. Each camp merely serves with the stamp of our approval, but they are not allowed to present the real issues. Now, and you've heard me many, many times over the years talk about the Hegelian dialectic and how it operates, how the left and the right always are pitting different ideas, rubbing together, and then what happens is the synthesis or the outcome is had for the real masters who are controlling it. And that's exactly what they're telling you right here. The Hegelian dialectic at work. So by creating controversy on all levels, no one really knows what to do. So in all this confusion, we go ahead and accomplish what we want with no hindrance. All right. Let's stop there for a minute. There's a lot more in this letter, but I've never, over the years, I've understood chaos and confusion involving how they operate. And it started when I was watching the strategy of tension in Italy, the terrorist attacks that were being put upon the Italian people, funded by, of course, the CIA, the Vatican, and etc., and the Italian special ops, things like that, working to create terrorist events, to create that chaos. And I also understood that you could see the folly that goes on in government, where they're constantly arguing about things that really take your eye off the real ball that's being passed from, one corrupt leader to another. But as the years have passed, looking back from those days in the late 80s to now, the chaos and confusion has always been there, but not to the level it is, at least in America and in Europe, like I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is, look at the confusion that the Trump administration is causing. What is Trump's real motive? Well, he works for the same people I talked about. He's presenting a right-wing populist agenda, which is very popular to a lot of people, and in theory, not a bad agenda when you think about it. Put America first, get jobs, do all those different things, but in that program of his, it's constant confusion. He's constantly saying reckless things. He's constantly doing things more as an entertainer, more as someone that wants you to just listen to him every day and either laugh at him or cry because you got a president like that. But what he's done with this movement, and they're really smart by doing this, and he was selected to be president 15 years ago, at least, maybe even before that, and we know that from shows that have appeared where they predicted his presidency, and those shows are actually funded by the same people we talk about. But what Trump really does behind the scenes, and in front of all of us to see, is create such chaos amongst the population where 50% of the people hate him, think he's the worst thing since, he's like Hitler. He's a man that has no scruples. He hates women. He says anything. He calls people crazy. He just called the president of Mexico crazy again. He's done that constantly over the period of the short time he's been in public life. And so what's the reaction from the political party on the other side? That's just complete pandemonium. I mean, you got calls for he's insane, he needs to be impeached, and people listen to this. People are they're turning their TVs on more than ever. The ratings on Fox, this channel is skyrocketing because of this chaos. And so the purpose is to basically keep you satisfied, keep you tuning in, keep you thinking about these crazy things, while, he gets a few things done on the side, and the political system in Washington gets nothing done. It hasn't got half of what people expected so far. But the real thing about it is it's really where we left off regarding creating this controversies. It's reaching levels I've never seen. In America, every other day there is, a false flag event in a school somewhere, somehow. You're not getting away with going 1 week without something drastically, happening. And you've seen it. Now, in Europe, it's even worse. Look at England recently. England has become, they've just allowed jihad Muslims who were in the jihad, proven, this is, we know it's been orchestrated, but let's just talk about what they've done so you can understand. They've allowed these Muslim jihadists back into England with open arms, saying the best way to treat this is to show them love now. These were people that probably were failed suicide bombers, and they didn't kill themselves, and so now they're coming back to do more harm, and they're letting them in, while at the same time, there's been 3 incidents of conservative Christian people trying to come in to speak to people in the UK about, populism, about the importance of being a good English citizen, etc., and they have been banned. They will not let them in. One was from Australia, another from the United States, and they were not allowed in the country. Tell me what that's about. And if you go to these cities now, whether it be Rome, whether it be Paris, whether it be in Sweden, whether it be England, you got pockets now of what's called no-go zones. And these no-go zones are places the police of those countries won't even go into. Why? Because they've been told to stand down. And then you, as a white European citizen, go in there and you'll be harassed. And guess what? You can be tried under Sharia law. Not the law of your sovereign country. They've set up Sharia courts already in all these cities. And it's public knowledge. Now, if you think anything different's going to happen in America, think again. Because we've reported on a guy by the name of Fethullah Gulen in this country, legally, from Turkey, who is a jihadist, who is a radical Muslim, being allowed to live in the Pocono Mountains in a mansion brought here by William Jefferson Clinton to spread radical Muslim teachings in schools all over our country. To the tune of billions of dollars. We're funding him to somewhere for $300 million a year for these schools. And he's presented as a moderate. Now, let me tell you why Clinton, Bush, and the rest of them worked together. Here's all you got to think about. Do you remember the recent coup in Turkey where President Erdogan was almost killed? And the real story behind the scenes was that he got tipped off and his life was saved by about 10 or 15 minutes, and he scurried away in his airplane, asked asylum in England, but they wouldn't let him there. Why wouldn't they let him in England? So he had to go someplace else. I think he went, I can't remember. But anyway, Erdogan was under a coup that was basically the fruits of what Fethullah Gulen did in Turkey 30, 40 years ago. This radical Muslim influence in Turkey was going to overthrow Erdogan and what is considered, if you know anything about politics in in the Middle East and Europe, Turkey's kind of like the most democratic of all Muslim countries. It is the last barrier between radical Islam and Syria and all these other countries and the West. And Turkey's a very vital place for American military. Spend billions of dollars and gives billions of dollars to Turkey for 2 air bases there, nuclear bases, to basically create a line between radical Muslims and the West. So what was Fethullah Gulen? He's been a radical Muslim for years. He'd been spreading jihad in Sweden, I remember back in the 90s, in countries all over Europe, and this is backed up not by just theory, but by facts and people that we've interviewed, as well as other journalists who've talked about it openly. And Gulen's remnants remained in Turkey, and with the help, of course, of the CIA and the MI6 and other intelligence agencies, they finally staged a coup to basically get rid of any kind of democratic ideas in Turkey to kind of push radical Islam farther west. So the coup failed. They can't always be right. They do make mistakes. So Erdogan comes out publicly, and if you read the papers in Italy or France or other places, you would get divergent ideas about what happened in Turkey, because Turkey is a really important country. And little do Americans understand the importance of Turkey, not only in geopolitical affairs today, but the history of that country. The type of people that live there, very, very strident and tough in their beliefs. The Turkish people have a strong history, a long history of standing up for their values. And you don't want to get into a backyard fight with a Turk. Put it that way. But anyway, so Turkey, now this coup occurs, and there's chaos, many people killed. The Western papers here in America depicted Erdogan as the bad guy. I mean, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, they all depicted it was Erdogan's fault. Look, he's killing all these people, and the people got tired of it. When in fact, it was just the other way around. It was the remnants of Fethullah Gulen, a Turk, who wasn't there anymore. Let me tell you how he had to leave and why Bill Clinton brought him here. Fethullah Gulen, the remnants of his jihad, or his Islamization of Turkey in a radical sense, bringing Sharia law instead of a democratic Turkey, were there. And he had to leave years ago to save his life, so guess what? Bill Clinton and the Clintons brought him, gave him asylum here in America, and depicted him as a moderate. This is moving their agenda to bring in radical Muslims into America, as they're doing now in France, Italy, Spain, and England. And so Gulen has set up shop here since the 90s, given protection first by Clinton, second by the Bushes, then by Obama. So now you figure, here's what you figure. We got this guy Trump coming in saying, I'm going to put an end to radical Islam. I'm going to stop ISIS. I'm going to do this. But when the rubber hit the road and Erdogan publicly came out and asked for the release of Fethullah Gulen to come to Turkey to stand trial for his crimes against his own country, guess what you heard? First you heard, we'll look into it. That was over a year and a half. That was over a year when he took office, when that coup in Turkey took place. Since then, not a word. Erdogan's been shut up. He's been told to forget about it. You're not getting him. Because they're bringing in, I'm telling you, the reason is he's creating a jihad here in America. He's allowed to, he's depicted as a moderate when he's not. And if Trump was on the level, if Trump was not in the hands of the Vatican-led New World Order, he would have turned over one of the biggest jihadists in the world, not doing it through weaponry and grenades and suicide bombing, doing it through education with billions of dollars. That's why he's here. And that's why Trump is on their team, because he would have gotten rid of him. He knows all about it. But you don't hear anything about it in the newspaper. Where are these great New York Times reporters getting paid a lot of money? They're not on call. They're told what to write. There's no freedom of the press in America anymore. And so Gulen remains, and that to you tells you that Trump, Clinton, the Bushes, and Obama are all the same. No different, just spouting out different theories, different political views. That's the end of it. So, does it end there? Well, no. We have pockets in America. There's at least 25 different places. One is up in a place called, It's upstate New York. They have exactly about 40 acres or 50 acres, probably given to by the government, where they're openly, radical Muslims are there with weapons, and you can take photos. They've gotten videos of them. The FBI said, well, we know they're there. We're monitoring them. Well, what do you mean monitoring? You got a gun problem in America, right? You're telling a good American citizen he shouldn't carry this weapon, but then again, you're allowing radical Islam to exist right here, and you do nothing about it. If you look at some of the videos they've given, and in fact, a few Americans accidentally went on their property and were basically met with gunpoint, get out of here, on their own territory in New York. And you got these pockets of radical Islam openly marching death to America with weapons in their hands. And the FBI allows them to exist when in the same time they're raiding Christian ministries? Doesn't that tell you something, folks? It tells you you better start thinking a little deeper and understand that what we say in this show means a lot, because you're going to get to the bottom of why they're doing it and who's doing it. So, we get back to this whole idea of confusion, and it's never been greater than it is today in this country, and the same in Europe. I've never seen it. And we're all out of time. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.